Professor Timothy Morton, who, if anyone was at IMC and saw my paper, I was kind of dealing with Timothy's work with hyperobjects a little bit in relation to Middle Earth. Fascinating research and so applicable. So Professor Timothy Morton is Rita Shea Goofy Chair in English at Rice University and Director of the Cool America Foundation. Morton is the author of Hell in Search of a Christian Ecology, over 20 other books translated 46 times into 19 languages, and 300 essays. So, Sarah, you got a way to go. Challenge presented. In 2014, Morton gave the Wellick Lectures in Theory at UC Irvine and has collaborated with Laurie Anderson, Bjork, Jennifer Walsh, Susan Kucera, Hafner Arnadottir, Adam McKay, Jeff Bridges, Olafur Eliasson, and Pharrell Williams. In 2019, Morton's opera Time, Time, Time was performed around Europe. In 2018, they curated art exhibitions on their book Hyperobjects, which I've just mentioned, a brilliant book I would really recommend. With his other 19, their other 19 books in Barcelona and Marfa, Texas. Morton has been featured in the New Yorker, The Guardian, Vice, and Wired. Tim, it is a pleasure, and thank you so much for coming and talking to us today.
Thanks very much for having me. Am I audible?
You are indeed, and we can see you at the moment.
Hi. Okay, good. Thank you very much. It's a great honor. May I begin?
You can indeed. Are you sharing a PowerPoint with us at all?
I'm not.
Absolutely fine. Then over to you.
Yeah, hi everybody. It's a huge honor to be a part of this. You know, this has been a very, very interesting year for me. A few months ago, I gave a lecture at the Blake Society. Also, it's like a huge honor. It's very interesting to hear the paper about Blake earlier, and the paper just now on Shelley, right? Because my dissertation was about Shelley. It's great to hear those things. And, you know, I've been wanting to write about Blake all my life. And in the end, I wrote this book called Hell, where I was able to talk about Blake. And I guess I've been wanting to write about or talk about Tolkien to people all my life, only I would not have dared to imagine that I would be invited to this. So it's fantastic for me. It's a Saturday, which means that me and my son Simon, my daughter Claire is away in Leipzig right now, and my wife Trina are going to get some noodle soup and sit down and watch one of the Peter Jackson films, which is a thing that we do every Saturday. We've done it since 2017. So, you know, I've gone way past the sort of hate watching aspect of it, you know. Thanks for laughing if you are. You know, there's just so much to say that I feel like I want to say everything, you know, but I've only got 45 minutes. I feel a bit like I understand Sauron a little bit, you know. I want to see everything. I want to show you I can see everything. I want to know everything, you know. I want to be everywhere. I have this dream of omniscience, right? I want to be able to perform. I know everything about Tolkien. This is very much going to be, however, a Lord of the Rings paper that I'm going to do. And the title is The Grey Rain Curtain Turned All to Silver Glass. And the subtitle is Heavenly Tolkien. And why would I be wanting to give a paper such as this, right? Well, so I wrote this book. And the title is Hell, and the subtitle is In Search of a Christian Ecology, right? And why am I doing that? You know, for a start, maybe the phrase "in search of a Christian ecology" kind of implies that where the hell could it be, right? There is sort of maybe there isn't one, yeah. But nevertheless, I think it's important, very important right now, to engage with religion. And indeed with Christianity, which is being sort of taken over by fascism, by white supremacy in the USA right now. It's sort of important that they not be allowed get the copyright on that, just as a tactical thing. But I think actually Christianity has got some very, very powerful things to say to ecology, right? And a lot to say to the planet right now. And I guess, you know, one of the places we could start actually would be paradoxically, you know, because the theme of the conference is Romanticism. So let's just start with the transcendental quality, right? Attempts to embody heaven on earth have often created kind of hell, right? Like a good definition of a fascist is someone who knows that they're the goody. They know they're the goody, right? Like the people who invaded the Capitol building on the 6th of January 2021 knew that they were the goody. Yeah, whereas being a genuinely good person might involve feeling like you might be a bit of a bad person quite a lot, right? And being a good lecturer might involve wondering whether you might be a bit of a bad lecturer. Please say yes. And being a truly great country, you know, as in make America great at all, might involve realizing that you might be a bit of a rubbish country. Yeah, right. You've got the legacy of slavery has to be dealt with. You know, that's kind of what the phenomenology, to use a posh word, of goodness is a kind of, is that quality, right? It's sort of what is named in the phrase original sin, the St. Augustine concept, right? So I want to start with the transcendental. Yeah, the fact that when you can't directly embody heaven on earth if you're a human being. If you try to do it, it's going to screw up somehow. And in a funny way, Sauron also knows that Sauron is the goody, right? In a funny way, it's the whole thing is an attempt to create a kind of omniscience and an omnipotence and an omnipresence on Earth or in Middle Earth. Yeah. So that to that extent, Sauron thinks they're the hero of Lord of the Rings, and this is the problem, right? They think they're the goody, yeah. Whereas I think, you know, one of the things about Christianity that I'm sure Tolkien and his friend C.S. Lewis would agree with is this kind of funny feeling of, you know, the way I like to say it, it's in a letter of St. Paul, right, where he basically says, you know, you're an ambassador of heaven. To wit, everything that's happening in this world, right, all the nastiness, all the horribleness, all the loveliness, you know, everything like that is, as it were, happening on a kind of a 2D surface, right? But you are in fact 3D. Yeah, there's this other dimension that is completely uncontaminated by all of the stuff that's happening. It's sort of like, why does any kind of theism appeal to alcoholics, right? Because it's got this quality of the higher power, yeah, which isn't just like the biggest, baddest mafia boss, right? Like when it is said the kingdom of heaven is at hand, it doesn't mean a mafia guy much more powerful than the mafia guys in charge right now is going to come down with an Uzi and sort everybody out. This time it's personal. Right, this is the problem with the fascists, right? They've got these sort of pictures of Trump as Rambo, which is also a horrible misinterpretation of poor old PTSD Rambo, in my opinion. Coming and sort of distributing, you know, dishing out vengeance. But if King of Kings means anything, it actually means king in a sort of a loop, right? Like actually sort of transcending and therefore kind of undermining the very concept of king, the earthly concept of it, yeah. And so sort of let's start with that and the fact that romantic poetry is very much a conversation, as was said just now in the lovely paper about Shelley, with the transcendental, yeah. And let's acknowledge with a philosopher like Hegel, you know, that one thing that romantic art is all about is like the failure of the 2D anything to embody this transcendental realm, right? You can't ever express beauty as such, is how Hegel puts it. You can only ever really express the inability to fully express it as such. And so your art becomes this kind of beautiful failure, yeah. Now, this is where I would sort of part company a bit with Hegel. I'm looking at my notes here, my notes for this lecture, yeah. I think Tolkien's doing something much more interesting than just embodying the failure, actually. Tolkien, as a scholar of medievalism and as a Christian, right, is actually focusing in, I think, on the story aspect of Romanticism, right? Romanticism comes from the word roman, which is the French word for story. Yeah, the idea that truth has the shape of a story, right? That you can't know it directly, right? You can't see it directly. The whole deal with Sauron is wanting to see and know directly, right? The Palantir, this kind of internet where you can sort of try to see everything everywhere directly and appropriating those for his own purposes. Yeah. It's the kind of spiritual quest quality of obviously, which is also interestingly sort of overlapping with a kind of scientific quest quality that I think is the key thing about Romanticism for Tolkien, right? The fact that actually truth is a thing that unfolds over time. You can't sort of take time out of it. And to some extent, right, again, as a Christian, I think Tolkien would want to know that time, in a way, is, you know, to use a Tolkien-ish kind of image, as a kind of mist or a sort of emanation, you know, from the mouth of the Holy Spirit in a funny way. The Holy Spirit is the time, right? That actually things are never directly present, right? They're always kind of shimmering or flickering or coming in and out of existence, right? And this quality, this very special quality of shimmery flickery, is exactly what is the heaven. Yeah. It's not something that you can embody directly on earth. And it is made out of this, it has this irreducibly shimmery quality, right? Everything in Tolkien it is kind of this kind of journey, but also a kind of allegory of reading, right? In a way, so I produced this thing in Oxford when I was an undergrad at Oxford. I did a play based on the Seafarer, yeah, the Old English poem, with music and you know, little extra bits and stuff. And it's a contemplative work, right? It's a sacred text, the reading of which gives you the feel of being a Christian with none of the content, right? Like that, this is the skill, this is the beauty, right? This is a real genius, right? Gives you the feel of, like, for example, having agreed with the argument, and then the argument just kind of downloads automatically already, right? Like, I have a dream. Yeah. Martin Luther King gives you the feel of knowing that the future can be radically, progressively different from the past. He gives you the feel of being an anti-racist, right? Before the content just kind of automatically plops into place. He's already won when he says, I have a dream. It's a fantastic thing to say, right? And so the Seafarer is actually giving you, you know, it's all, you know, voyaging on the ocean, and it's all dark and stormy and all that kind of stuff, right? It's giving you the feel of being a Christian without the content, you know. And in a way, that's sort of perfect, because if the content is, as I say, sort of transcendental, then you can't ever directly point at it, right? But you can give the feel of it, and the feel of it, you know, in a couple of the Gospels is sorry, notes are upside down here. The kingdom of heaven is at hand, right? The kingdom of heaven is at hand, and when you look at hand in Greek, it doesn't necessarily mean, you know, 5 minutes from now into the future. Actually, the Aramaic that's being spoken there is more like the word sort of proximate or proximity, right? At hand means handy, right? Handy, like the loose change in your pocket, if we indeed have loose change in our pocket, like your phone in your pocket or your keys, right? The kingdom of heaven is the proximity of your keys in your pocket. You can't see it because it's at hand, because it is your hand. It's handy, right? It's when you look for it directly, it kind of disappears. It's just kind of there. You're in the zone, right? It's sort of there, but it's not there. And so, to this extent, actually, you know, the Christianity isn't what Heidegger calls it, right? Heidegger says Christianity is Platonism for the masses, right? Just a kind of nihilism. It's very weird that he would say that, being somebody who was a Jesuit priest in training, but in a funny way, perhaps it's not. Because you know how sometimes the way people have thoughts and feelings is like the inverse of what they're thinking and feeling, right? So Catholicism was this big assault on what it called Gnosticism, which is the idea that, you know, we're spiritual beings trapped in a world of matter. Yeah. And while it was an assault on that, on the other hand, the way to be a Catholic very often is to have this kind of despise the body, you know, a kind of assault on the physical, right? Giving rise, in fact, to the endless awful abuse scandals that hit the church. There is a kind of Gnosticism in there, you know. But if anything, a genuine Christianity would be more like what I would call a flipped Gnosticism. Flipped Gnosticism, right? It's not that we're spiritual beings trapped in a world of matter. It's that we are lovely, broken, flawed, necessarily flawed physical beings, right? Including all the thoughts and feelings that emerge from this physicality. Physical beings trapped in a universe of horrible, terrible ideas, right? Terrible ideas. Master, slave, yeah. Subject, object, male, female, active, passive. All these things are actually subsets of master versus slave, which is the horriblest idea, the one which Sauron wants to sort of reduce everything to. And to that extent, right, The Lord of the Rings is actually a kind of working with the profoundly anti-slavery quality of a certain essential version of Christianity, I would argue, right? Trying to rescue the physical world from the way it's kind of stuck in ideas. Some of the things we think about the physical world are just like, ugh. Including, for example, materialism, right? Which has nothing to do with science. Yeah, materialism is a kind of belief, right? Like atoms are more real than the things they make up. Like the atoms that make up Tim are more real than Tim because atoms go on longer than Tim. That's nothing to do with science. That's everything to do with a belief that things that persist for longer are more real than other things. It's what is called the metaphysics of presence in deconstruction. That's not science. Science isn't saying Tim is only made of atoms and atoms are more real. That's nothing to do with it, right? Science is just interpretations of data, right? And the sort of the funny sciencey feeling, right, which is that maybe all of the ideas in my head are wrong compared to the real. You know, again, it's sort of like the real kind of is transcending all of the things you can say about it, right? And so there's something about the physical world that's very special that isn't just about, you know, materialist beliefs or kind of Gnostic thoughts about how horrible it is, right? There's something about it that's very special, yeah. Something that is evoked, I would argue, in the Middle-earthness of Tolkien's imaginary, right? And sort of think about it like this. Like one reason why I brought up the Seafarer is that in a funny way, the Lord of the Rings is a sacred text, right? It's a kind of contemplative text, the reading of which creates inside of you a certain kind of feel or feeling, yeah? Does inside of me anyway, yeah? And it's always encouraging you to do this reading, right? Like there's all kinds of ways in which the whole thing features people constantly looking at script of all kinds of different kinds, right? You're looking at the script on the ring, or you're looking at the inscription around the doors of Moria, right? You're looking at Bilbo writing his book, you know, there's all this little kind of clues. It's almost like you're looking at a dream, you know. It's one way in which it's not an allegory, is that in a way, there's nothing behind it. It's more like you're kind of spectating a dream about reading it in a funny way. It's like you're sort of conjuring up the world of Middle Earth by reading it, but it is also imagining you in a funny way. It's as a contemplative text, it's sort of pointing at you. Yeah. So, you know, there's this kind of trudgy quality where you've got to keep on reading, you know, you've got to keep on going. To that extent, Sam Gamgee is the reader, right? There are the hobbits are like little virtual reality versions of me and you committing to reading it, right? Like even if we don't get it, we're going to keep on keeping on. And I love the BBC music, right? I listen to Lord of the Rings audiobook pretty much every night to go to sleep, right? So I'm very familiar with this. I've been listening to it since it came out in 1981, yeah. And that kind of dun, 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 the sort of slow andante trudging. It's beautiful, right? Like allowing yourself to kind of enjoy trudging through endless pages. My mum hated those bits when she read it to me, right? She hated the bits that were like supposedly the in-between bits and can't we get down to it, right? But of course, if you're a super fan, it's like those are the good bits in a way, and or at least those are great bits. And there's a kind of continuity between the sort of the trudging, which includes trudging through nasty, disgusting stuff, and then the sort of revelatory stuff, right? Which I would imagine sort of gets thought and imagined in terms of like script that is luminous and sparkling and silvery and fireworks and that kind of level, right? There's a sort of continuity there because we're dealing with a physical world, right? Where there is a kind of a continuum between the stuff that is seemingly dull and disgusting and dreary and the stuff that is magical and wonderful and incredible. All of them, all of these things are Middle Earth, right? All of them. They're all like inscriptions on a 2D surface, as it were, literally writing. We're evoking this transcendental world. Yeah, evoking it. So, you know, it's kind of like you're being put in the position of a Christian, or indeed of the Christian God, imagining Earth. It's the inverse of C.S. Lewis, right? C.S. Lewis is putting you in the position of a regular human being, say, for example, an evacuee, you know, World War II, imagining what it would be like to be a Christian, right? Like Lucy backs into Narnia, so whoa, and to that extent, and I love that, by the way, and to that extent, you know, it is an allegory, right? C.S. Lewis is definitely an allegorist, yeah. But this is the inverse. This is actually imagining sort of something that is unspeakable, aka a physical world, right? Like if we really were to enjoy this world, you know, we would almost kind of enjoy it as it were as a kind of Middle Earth, you know. And I think G.K. Chesterton, who Tolkien was a big reader of Chesterton, right, would be basically like, you know, to use a controversial word that he would use, which would be pagan, yeah, just as a kind of horribly compressed umbrella term for the kind of transactional relationship with the forces of whatever that is. You know, you can enjoy that stuff much better as a Christian, is Chesterton's point. You can enjoy the kind of slightly scary, threatening fairyland quality because you know that all that stuff is a 2D and you're 3D, right? So you can be a better, quote unquote, pagan in a way, right? You can sort of enjoy it better. And I understand there's a horrible kind of history of this. And it's sort of like Tolkien knows that, right? And I think personally, he's trying to disarm the bomb from inside of the white European indigenous culture space that's been appropriated constantly by fascism, right? Like, so fascism is like a paganized reinterpretation of Christianity along the lines of like Arthur and Parsifal and blah, 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 right? The Grail legend and all that, right? So Tolkien knows all about that, right? And he's going to go inside that and he's going to try and do the other way around, right? He's going to try and like imagine that stuff in the context of being a Christianity. Yeah. So the whole text is like a kind of a contemplative exercise, right? And as a long practiced meditator, I've been doing Buddhist meditation for like 30 something plus years. There are parts of it that are really boring, right? Most people, when they hit that level of anxiety, boredom, they quit because there's something wrong with meditation or there's something wrong with me, I can't really do it. But that's the good bit, right? That's the juicy bit, because you find that inside of the boredom is this beautiful oasis of something else that wasn't cooked up by your ego, but you got to kind of trudge through it to kind of get there, right? And so I think personally that, you know, it's an imagining of an unspeakable physical world, like the magical quality, yeah, in Tolkien is always sort of worming its way around an unspeakability, right? And the trick is like, how long can you keep that going? How many hundreds of pages can you keep doing that for? Well, apparently you can keep doing it for, you know, here's my at the moment I was reading it for the third time to my kids, you know, with somewhere in the bit where Frodo and Smeagol and Sam are kind of meeting up, I do. You know, you how long can you keep it going? So about over 1,500 pages in this one, right? And you know, so this physical world is kind of unspeakable, and in a way, that's actually a beautiful image for the world as imagined by a benign God, right? So you know, imagine God, you know, created the angels. Some of them became devils. So in a funny way, God got like a C+ for that. He's like, oh, maybe I should try and do better next time, right? Like at least, you know, was he aiming for a D? You know, it's kind of crazy to think, you know, God got a C+ or C- for the angels. So maybe now he's going to try and fail some more, right? But on the other hand, maybe he was trying to exit from the whole idea of success or failure altogether, right? Like, so in Milton's Paradise Lost, Satan lands on the wall of paradise and he goes, wow, this is amazing. It's an improvement. It's an upgrade. It's heaven 2.0. Yeah, right. But maybe the whole idea that it's better than it's an improvement is part of the trouble, right? Like Sauron's trying to improve on, yeah. But that ends up just like reducing this world to just nothing, yeah, reducing it to meaning in a way, right? To like this world is too vague, there's too many shadows in it, there's too much darkness, you know, why are you using all these images that are gray? You know, why don't we make them a bit more fluorescent? You know, silver, it's not as good as gold, you know, why don't you use something more, right? Like the attempt to reduce it to something better in a funny way is still a kind of reducing it, yeah. It's the meaningfulness of the world rather than the meaning, right? That's the trouble with allegory. It's like you're looking for the meaning, but what if the meaning was always a little bit compared to the beautiful, lovely, mysterious meaningfulness, right? In a funny way, meaning is always from the past, right? Like we know what words mean because we used them in the past. Yeah, and I would argue that now that we're in the world of internet and QAnon and stuff, there's lots of meaning in the world. There's too much meaning, right? There's too much meaning. And as a PTSD person, it's like, there's a meaning, right? Like in the basement of me, there's like a little newspaper, you know, this just in, Tim Morton is a piece of blank, 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 right? That's meaning. Yeah. What we require in this world is the future, right? And the future, as Martin Luther King points out succinctly, is I have a dream, which in a way is like the Lord of the Rings, in like one sentence. Yeah. The future is the meaningfulness, which is always based on the possibility that it might be meaningless, right? Like there are so many moments in the book when you're looking at a word and wondering, what is it? You know, like what's the Elvish for friend, you know? There are moments when it's opaque, yeah, and it's the opacity that's beautiful, right? That within words themselves is this opacity, this beautiful gray, you know. I think of it synesthetically, it has a kind of a smell of dust after rain, right? It's called petrichor. It's my favorite smell, right? The smell of brutalist architecture, the smell of concrete, the wet dust smell, right? There is this kind of petrichor, wet clay, right? As part of the universe. And even within meaning itself is this mysteriousness, right? Like Gödel and Derrida, I would argue, Heidegger a little bit, would be of saying that within the structure of meaning itself, forget the fact that ideas are made of squiggles, like signifiers and all that stuff. Within meaning itself, there are things that are true that cannot be proved, right? So there is this opacity inside of meaning itself. And if anything, the Lord of the Rings is this huge, big, 1,000+ page opaque thing, right? It lands in this wonderfully ambiguous gray, right? The gray havens. Yeah, that's the heaven, the possibility, right, of heaven, which is predicated on the possibility there might not be one, right? Which is sort of like, there are so many there are so many different types of kind of quasi-heaven, but they don't really function as heaven because they're kind of just cultural artifacts, right? You've got the Rohirrim believing in the ancestral realm, right? You've got the elves who sort of live forever in their sort of art world, you know, of the timelessness, right? But neither of these are really sort of heaven. Yeah, heaven is always this kind of shimmery, sort of not quite there quality, you know, and you're sort of seeing it from the point of view of Sam, because you're the reader. You're seeing Frodo going off there to that island, but then you have to actually carry on, and there's a few more paragraphs where Sam's like, "Well, I'm back," right? That's embodying heaven as best as you can, not as a sort of message with a sort of concrete, heavy duty meaning to it, but as a kind of shimmery meaningfulness that is always achieved through this kind of spiritual exercise engagement with the text, right? And you know that it's real, but it can't be proved, right? Because you've already met Tom Bombadil. You've already gotten the line is so beautiful, right? I think I should just read it. Just read the quotation here. I have a bunch of quotations which I'm never going to get to. That night they heard no noises, but either in his dreams or out of them, he could not tell which, right? This is the paradox, right? We don't know, right? This kind of don't know quality. And I'm getting back to God and the devils in a second. Frodo heard a sweet singing running in his mind, a song that seemed to come like a pale light behind a grey rain curtain, right? This is the good bit. The fact that it's a curtain, right? The fact there might not be anything behind it, right? And growing stronger to turn the veil all to glass and silver. So it's not transparent completely. It's got this aesthetic shimmer. Yeah. Until at last it was rolled back and a far green country opened before him under a swift sunrise. And these images of sort of far and swift, sort of imagine, like the whole point is the I have a dream expansiveness of those two words, far and swift, right? You're not being given a product. You're being invited to visualize. Yeah. And visualization is just is like a feeling rather than making something concrete, right? Like New York City. Yeah, you don't have to go there to visualize it, right? It's a feeling, right? Like New York, what a wonderful town. You don't have to build it up. Like here we've got Fifth Avenue, then we got Sixth, then we got Seventh, we got alphabet cities over here, right? It's a feeling. New York is a feeling. That's visualization, right? And the far green country is allowing you to visualize, which is much more important than like delivering a thing. You know, once it's gotten down to that level, all the mystery's gone. You know what everything means. It's one ring to rule them all. You know, just pure nihilism. You just destroyed the magic. Yeah. So what if God wasn't trying to get an A or a D or a C at all? What if God was just trying to feel God? You know, there is this theory of ex deo creation. Like, so, you know, the Catholic orthodoxy is God created the universe out of nothing. Yeah. And I think this is probably a little bit, at least symbolically, refuted in the Silmarillion, that Tolkien really thinks that. Yeah. The orthodoxy goes like this, right? God can do anything because God is omnipotent. Therefore, God could have created the world out of nothing. Therefore, God did create the world out of nothing. And if you don't agree, we're going to torture you until you do agree, right? But another possibility, which is the Milton thing, which is that God created the world out of themselves. Yeah, so that the universe is a kind of God-shaped hole inside of God, right? And it's sort of like how God gets to know that they're God. You got all these kind of crazy thoughts going in your head, and you just want to quiet down and just sort of feel what you really are, right? Meditate, just sort of be your brain for a bit, just be your physical body, right? The word that Milton's Son of God uses to create the universe is silence. Yeah. In a funny way, this physical world is God going shh to themselves. Yeah. The world is mysterious because it is the mystery of God, right? Like Exhibit A, where's God, right? Like, where's heaven? Also, Exhibit A of Middle Earth, where's God in Middle Earth? Where is Jesus? Where is heaven? That's the whole thing, right? From a certain point of view, which I'm hoping that you won't think of now as paranoid because I've built it up. The absence of traces of God is exactly some kind of upside down inverted footprint of God's existence, right? The word mystery comes from the Greek word muein, right? Muein is onomatopoeia for The universe is God going right? And furthermore, according to this, Earth is a cosmos-shaped hole in the cosmos. It's how the cosmos gets to know that it's the cosmos. And Eden is a Earth-shaped hole, hollow inside of Eden, and Eve is a Adam-shaped hollow inside of Adam, right? Like these, and this is interestingly neurologically the case, funnily enough, right? Like your sense of your basic kind of heads, shoulders, knees, and toes, your sense of your basic, they call proprioception, physicality, is literally a environment-shaped hollow in the environment, right? You get the environmental awareness, which, sort of touching things, a computer, skin, table, whatever, cup, yeah? And then, like noise-canceling headphones, your sentient system inverts it, and the inverted silhouette image of that is your basic heads, shoulders, knees, and toes feeling, right? So Lord of the Rings is giving you the heads, shoulders, knees, and toes, yeah, of God. That's the point of it. It's kind of it's a physical world dreaming of God's existence, right? And you're in this paradoxical position of sort of being Sam, like the lowliest, humblest possible character, right, in a way. And and we're confused, right? Like tending to think that Frodo's the goodie and Gollum's the baddie, and wanting it all to have a meaning and wanting it to be, and also sort of humble and understanding that you can't quite ever evoke. I got some Sam quotations here. When he's in Lothlorien, and he says something very beautiful. He says, whether they've made the land, that is the elves, or the land's made them, it's hard to say. If you take my meaning, right? If you take my meaning, right? I can't directly point to stuff, I'm not that great, but if you take, I can only evoke. But this is the whole thing, that the entire universe is God evoking, right? That you can't get further than this evocation quality. So in a funny way, the humblest way of talking is the highest level, right? It's wonderfully quiet here. Yeah, again, this sort of feeling like the ultimate would be to like stretch the silence or the quietness out over thousands of pages. So, but this quietness was kind of somehow still legible in all of the cascading words, right? I think we can agree that that's sort of like the Tolkien feeling, that funnily enough, there is this huge, massive, peaceful silence, right? And he's already given it to you in the Tom Bombadil bit. In a funny way, like the absence of Tom Bombadil from any of the more kind of commercial renderings of the novel is a kind of weird backhanded compliment to the role that episode plays, right? That it's a profoundly non-teleological, right? That the kind of the trudging through, walking through, journeying through, road goes over on and on quality, right? Precisely doesn't have a logical stopping point and does not have a direction. It does not have a telos, right? If everything is the road, it does not have a goal. And if I was going to isolate one enemy of actual Christianity, I'm just going to go out on a limb here, and because I'm not a theologian, I can say these terrible generalizations, would be the Greek concept of telos, which has done a huge amount of damage in the world. Most like think about racism, right? Aristotle invented this idea that things are defined by what they're for, right? Macedonians like Alexander, who was his pupil, are for enslaving other people, and other people are for being enslaved by Alexander, right? That's like a teleological definition, right? And the whole idea of like, if you ramp it up a bit into fascism, it's this concept of destiny, and there's no accidents anymore. There's no possibility of accidents. But Tolkien puts accidents all the way through, right? The purely accidental quality of Gollum falling off the off the ledge there into the fire, right? In the end, it's an accident, right? It cannot be done. You can't get rid of the ring deliberately, because deliberate is part of the whole sort of phenomenological kit and caboodle of the ringness, right? Anyway, Sam, right? It's wonderfully quiet here. Nothing seems to be going on, and nobody seems to want it to. If there's any magic about, it's right down deep, or I can't lay my hands on it, in a manner of speaking. Yeah. I've never heard, in a manner of speaking, right? You can't directly appoint. I've never heard of a better land than this. It's like being at home and on a holiday at the same time, if you understand me. Yeah, I don't want to leave. All the same, I'm beginning to feel that if we've got to go on, then we best get it over, right? So it's this beautiful, like he said it there. Yeah, Sam said it, right? That the gorgeously, in the end, opaque physicality of the world is what is most evocative of something spiritual about it. Yeah. And so, yeah, there's a kind of heaven, but you can't ever like hold it, grasp it. You kind of can, in a way, get to it, but in a funny way, it's gotten to you already, right? The text has already kind of gotten inside of you and is doing its thing, which is kind of opening you up to the possibility of the time being the thing that determines how things are, that things are always kind of shimmery and sparkly and glittery, and not sort of just flatlining static lumps, right? I think I'll stop there and we'll do some questions, because I could probably just go on and on, as it were, adumbrating my thing and trying to prove that I'm good or smart or what have you.
Can we please give Tim a massive round of applause? Thank you so much for coming and talking to us today, and to really get into Lord of the Rings and allow it to get into us as well. So we do have a question online, and then sorry, they beat you to it. But yeah, we'll come into the room in a second. So your discussion of a kind of flipped Gnosticism and reframing physicality and embodiment in Christianity reminds Leah of David Abrams' Spell of the Sensuous, and of course, Thomas Berry. So Leah's wondering if there are other works that you might recommend that might speak to this work of, quote, wrestling Christianity away from the fascists.
Sure. That's a wonderful. Gosh, I'm so kind of caught up in the moment right now that my mind blanked a little bit. And I'm sure I can tell you some smart things if you just bear with me. But for example, I think so Milton is a really underrated poet. Yeah, everybody should really get a hold of Paradise Lost and just like go through it line by line, because it's a very detailed, by a very smart guy, theology down to the very grammar level, right? And the whole thing is about the intrinsically completely unmotivated, non-teleological loveliness of the physical world, Another thing you could do would be to go revisit the work of William Blake. Yeah, who was already part of this. Yeah. Blake wrote this thing called The Marriage of Heaven and Hell, right? And it's who's getting married to who, right? Heaven, that is ideas, thoughts, ideology, ideality, philosophy, whatever you want, right? Is getting remarried, because I think they got separated at some point. They're getting remarried to the body. Yeah, getting remarried to the biosphere. Yeah. If anything, Jesus and Buddha were all about the sensual world, right? Like Buddha's big mistake from a Hindu point of view was to eat this bowl of rice pudding. Yeah. Along came this old lady and she offered Buddha a bowl of rice pudding, and Buddha was like, oh, thank you, and ate it. And his colleagues in the forest there, who were like burning themselves alive in order to escape from samsara, were scandalized by this. But as soon as Buddha ate it, I don't know, maybe it was the cholesterol's fault, right? You know, when you haven't eaten cholesterol for a while and you eat a bar of chocolate, your brain goes, "Ooh, good boy," you know. And that was literally, so Buddha eating this rice pudding, and there's something in him. It's like, pleasure is the pathway, right? You can't delete that bit, right? Like that's that you don't want to like become the enemy of your physical embodiment, because you kind of can't extricate from that, right? And in the same way, Jesus is like, I'm not here to destroy the rules. I'm here to fulfill the rules. Let's go and pick these grapes. Yeah, let's drink some wine. I'll turn some water into it, and we're going to hang out with some prostitutes now. Yeah. And I think this is the point, right? I'm going to allow the physical to be the physical. And so I think personally, I like to see the good in everything. And I think you can kind of see this in a lot of writing. You know, I'm not a great fan of you should look at this particular author or this particular author. I think there's little bits of it everywhere. And I think that's because it's true, actually. I think you can't help this bit. But some people are on the side of it, right? And some people are kind of resist it, you know. That would be my first really clumsy answer to this, right? But I like that you brought up David Abrams' book, you know, and we are in this moment where, like, how do we live ecological facts is the key, right? People like me bombard us with ecological facts in the key of oppressive, terrifying, Book of Revelation level horror, right? You know, when you read a newspaper headline and it goes, you know, 40% of X at a 200,000 year extinction, that blah, blah, blah. And it's just like you open the Bible and it goes, giant dragon emerges from boiling ocean. You know, oh my God, you know, then you turn to the middle of the paper and somebody called Eeyore, naming no names and pointing no fingers, Eeyore is telling you that you're a bad person. You're not thinking about this right. You've got it wrong. You're not doing enough. The world is corrupt and evil. And, you know, page one, stupid. Editorial page, evil, stupid and evil, stupid and evil, right? Stupid and evil is not a good place from which to launch any kind of progressive politics, right? And so something like a reimagined spiritual, for want of a better word, like by which I mean full body engagement with these facts is required, you know. I mean, Martin Luther King was a pivotal person because of being a minister, right? He got everyone into the anti-racism by understanding how you do it, how you get people to really feel it, you know. And I don't know whether there's the beautiful quotation from Shelley, actually, which was up on the screen earlier, about poetry allows us to imagine what we know. That's exactly what I'm talking about. We know what to do, right? We know to stop fossil fuels, but we're not imagining it yet, right? It's paradoxical. We know already, right? Shelley already is talking about exhalations from factories. He's already talking about chemicals and industry and stuff like that 200 and something years ago, but we don't have the imagination to like feel it. We're not feeling it yet. And the way people like me talk, sometimes we might as well be working for big oil, because we're making everybody feel really paralyzed, yeah, and stupid and evil and like everything's terrible and despair, you know. I think Tolkien and Lewis were profoundly more radical than people like me have accidentally a little bit let ourselves think that they are, right? And one of the ways they are is they're trying to give you like a full body sensation feel of what it would be like to be, you know, on the side of being a good guy, you know, like genuinely good as opposed to fascist good. Yeah.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. We're going to move in the room. We do have a question here from one of our Blake scholars.
Thank you for such a great talk. I'm going to do the typical, this is more of a comment than a question. No, what I wanted to, I really, really enjoyed the idea of meaning rather than meaningfulness rather than meaning. And I just thought that maybe this was a really good way to look at the part in Lord of the Rings where Saruman says, "I'm not the white, I'm many-coloured," which as a child really confused me because you always want to find things out. And it's just Gandalf going, "I liked white better." And it's that kind of, it's almost like Saruman wants the meaning behind everything, all the power, and Gandalf, who is obviously the grey, is going, "No, I want the meaningfulness rather than meaning." I wondered if that was what you'd thought of that scene.
Oh, for real. In fact, you just made me think that Saruman's saying, I'm no longer Saruman 1.0, I'm Saruman 2.0. Now I've rebranded myself as a Saruman upgrade. I'm better than the previous version, right? So absolutely, it's on the side of meaning, you know, and he's got it all figured out, right? We must join with Sauron, right? He's got it all figured out. He knows, he thinks he knows what to do, and this is the problem, right? That the sort of bumbly, slightly stonery Gandalf guy, actually the bumbliness is part of it. Yeah. The allowing, you know, for the fireworks is sort of part of it. And I had a long quotation by Theodore Adorno on fireworks, right? Because it was the 4th of July the other day. And I live in a place in Houston now where you can stand on a bridge and you can see 270 degrees around you, all these different firework displays, right? And part of the genius of the firework display is that it transcends the physical world, right? Because there's this thing flashing in the sky, and it seems to be a kind of portent, but what does it mean? It's like sort of looking at calligraphy that kind of disappears into the void. You can't read it. Yeah, it looks portentous, but you can't read it, right? And then they're not totally spiritual, right? They're physical, right? They suggest a heightened physicality, right? They suggest like more meaningfulness and less meaning, in a way. Is exactly what fireworks are doing. Yeah, and so I sort of think there are so many bits in Lord of the Rings where the kind of the trudgy, grey, slimy stuff mutates into this wonderful cascading incandescent firework stuff. And I think it's sort of interesting actually that Sam, to my favorite character right now, adds that stanza about Gandalf's fireworks to Frodo's lament of Gandalf, because Frodo's all about Gandalf the person, but Sam's actually hit on the real thing there, which is Gandalf the fireworks. Yeah, and he rather beautifully says, this isn't good enough, you know, I can't capture, right? But that's the whole thing about fireworks. They can never capture. You're always waiting for the next one because they're never going to quite be what you want them to be. But that is the beauty of the fireworks. And in a funny way, that is the beauty. If there is any beauty in America, it is this kind of, you know, the fact that the Star-Spangled Banner isn't this plodding, you know, God save our great. It's this ambient poem. So can you see over there? Me and Laurie Anderson did a whole thing about this. It's this ambient thing of like, is that a flag? I can't quite see it, right? And the rocket's red glare and bombs bursting in air gave truth to the fact that the flag was still there. It's like you can hardly see the thing apart from these incandescent display. Yeah. And if anything, America is like a sort of weird broken ad for a future way of being, which is more kind of planet scale. I think it's definitely not a country yet, right? Because of the legacy of slavery. You know, you certainly can't make it great again, you know, but you could make it into something cool, you know. And I think that's in a way also the Lord of the Rings, right? It's taking all this like broken European mythology that's mostly been weaponized in Tolkien's time and making something cool out of it, right? Like instead of making it into this great thing that you sort of have to venerate, it's actually, this is really cool now. You've made it cool, dude.
Super, thank you. Do we have any more questions either on online or in person for Tim? Not in the room. Okay, so actually, I'm kind of curious about this as well. So, is there a particular edition of Milton's Paradise Lost that you'd recommend? Because obviously, we have various editions that we could always go to, but is there one in particular, like thinking about editorial notes, introductions, additional material that you would really recommend considering your answer to the first question?
Oh, sure. I would go with the Fowler one, right? The modernized spelling, because it makes it much more sort of fresh. You know, so what I did as an undergrad was to go with John Carey and Alistair Fowler's edition of Milton, the Longmans, yeah, which they've recently upgraded it, yeah. Taken some of the very unpleasant footnotes out. There was some bad misogynistic vibes in the footnotes of the Fowler, which he's removed from the new one, which is good, you know. And so I think that would be the one for me. The other reason why, each page has got footnotes so big that each little bit of Paradise Lost is like a little sonnet-sized thing. So it makes it much easier to sort of deal with, you know. But if you're into Lord of the Rings, then you'd be into this Paradise Lost, because again, it's like a sort of spiritual exercise to kind of journey through this book, you know, which is Milton, who's like a poor scholarship boy who went to the school that I went to, right? Like the original idea of the school was, let's give poor kids the operating system. You know, we're going to teach them Latin, Greek, and Hebrew grammar, and then set them loose on the world, right? And it's like, and this is what he did with it, right? He actually has this, it's a profoundly sort of anti-colonialism thing. He's sort of using classical mythology in the same way that Tolkien is using European sort of Norse Germanic mythology. I think it's the same kind of project, right? It's like, let's use these horrible ingredients which involve all kinds of nastiness to make something really cool out of it. And there is the same quality of like evoking a world that is profoundly, beautifully physical and not anything that can be directly kind of owned or grasped, right?
Super. Thank you yet again. And just one last opportunity. Do we have any final questions? No. Okay, right. In that case, can we please give Professor Tim Morton one final massive round of applause? Thank you so much.
Yay.